The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr Speaker.
Kelvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And Labor supports the bill and the composite parts of the drug and alcohol testing of community-based offenders, Bailees and other persons legislation bill, as the Minister said, divided for this reading into the bail drug and alcohol testing amendment bill, the parole drug and alcohol testing amendment bill, sentencing drug and alcohol testing amendment bill, the public safety public protection orders drug and alcohol amendment bill, and the returning offenders management and information drug and alcohol testing amendment bill, as the Minister said in her, that was put in here in the SOP to make sure that those people who have been detained or imprisoned overseas or convicted of crimes overseas, when they return here, they are under the same testing regime that people who have been released on bail into the community, or people who have been sentenced into the community, or people who are on parole after having spent time in prison, or those people who are the subject of public protection orders. In other words, people who have committed serious sexual or violent crimes. And as we know, drug and alcohol misuse is a driver of crime, and the numbers of people who have report using drugs and alcohol at the time of their arrest is approximately 48%. 2/3 of offenders on home detention, intensive supervision and supervision orders have identified alcohol or other drug abuse or addiction issues. So it makes sense that we put in place a regime that monitors those people who have got an abstinence condition, that we actually monitor that they actually do, because most offenders are not intrinsically motivated. They don't think to themselves, oh crikey, I better not drink alcohol, I better not participate with consume drugs. Most of them are many of them are extrinsically motivated, meaning that they need external pressure put on them to make sure that they abstain from the drugs and alcohol. That's why these conditions are put in place to actually help them and to help the community to be safer. To me, it's a win-win situation. The offenders are helped, albeit extrinsically, to abstain from drugs and alcohol. Their families would probably be really grateful that if they were kept off drugs and alcohol, so that they didn't offend, so that they didn't go back to prison, but certainly communities will be safer as well. So it's a win-win-win situation for the offender, for their families, and for the community. So some people may see it as an imposition on the offenders. But the reality is that we need to look after and make sure that our communities are kept safe. Every year there are thousands of offenders on community sentences and orders and Bailees that have an abstinence condition imposed, and this allows, as the Minister has said, the Commissioner of Police and the CEO of Corrections to have their people test these offenders. If the offenders know that they've got a high chance of being checked for drugs and alcohol, then chances are they'll be more inclined not to take the risk of consuming both drugs or alcohol. On the flip side, if they believe that they have a high chance of being caught with drugs or alcohol in their system, then, and that there will be consequences because of this, then chances are they'll be less inclined to consume drugs or alcohol. And we can draw a comparison with our poor burglary resolution rates, where burglars know that they have a 90% chance of getting away scot-free if they commit burglaries. So there's a high probability, because of that, that they'll go on to commit further burglaries. We also need to have a look at what's going on in prisons. Yesterday I met with a couple of former prisoners who, female prisoners who had obviously spent time in a female prison in South Auckland. They made a startling claim that there were, at any given time, not more than a dozen or so prisoners who are able to attend the drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs. They also said, and I've heard this from other prisoners as well, that the reason that prisoners attend the drug and alcohol programs is because prisoners from other units all come together in one room and it's basically easier for them to exchange drugs and alcohol. And they said that somebody who attends the drug and alcohol programs has to be a particularly motivated and determined person to actually break the habit, because of the fact that really they attend the drug and alcohol courses to actually exchange drugs. They also said that there was another place that they go to exchange drugs, and funnily enough, that is to church in prison. And they're not talking about just participating in the communion wine. They said that when prisoners come together from other units to church, it's just another, sort of broadens the market, I guess, for the exchange of drugs and alcohol. So it's good to hear that the Minister said over 3 years there, the government's putting $8.6 million into addressing this and $2.1 million into meth screening. There is a real need in prisons for greater support to help prisoners kick the habit. And as those prisoners told me, they have to be particularly motivated and particularly determined to kick the habit, because basically the conditions in prisons actually encourage drug and alcohol consumption. And they really, but the other thing they actually said is that they attend the courses and then they may have to wait 1 or 2 years before they actually get released into the community. So they're told you attend this 3 or 6 month course and then sit around for 2 years, but make sure you remember what you were told 2 or 3 years ago in that drug and alcohol course, and then apply it once you get out. And as a former educator, we know that if people are going to learn things, they actually need to be able to apply their knowledge and what they've learnt almost immediately. So the courses need to be probably more intensive, more regular, and include more prisoners. So corrections has more work to do in order to create the conditions where prisoners not only address the drug and alcohol issues, but both inside and outside in the community. And this is just a small, well, it's actually not even a small step, it's just another step to help monitor prisoners' consumption of drugs and alcohol. There was a concern around the equipment that's attached to the people and that it might give false positives, false positive readings on drug and alcohol testing. I'm sure, well, I'd like to think that corrections and the police have got the equipment to such a state that it won't give false positives. Because one of the problems with false positives is that it's really hard for the prisoner to actually prove that they're innocent. And I gave the example of how, in the committee stages, of how police have used with children in schools Listerine to show that the alcohol breath testing can pick up Listerine or pick up the alcohol in cologne. And it's very, very hard for an offender who is actually innocent, who has a false positive, to actually prove and be heard and believe that actually they didn't consume drugs and alcohol if the testing equipment provides a false positive. And chances are they'll end up back in prison. They'll be bitter and angry and twisted if they think that they've been treated unfairly. So it's important that that the prisoners and, the offenders and public have confidence in the use of alcohol monitoring technology and its effectiveness. We've got to make sure that testing for alcohol or drugs doesn't encroach on the right to be secure against unreasonable search and seizure. The Minister did say that the testing should be no more intrusive as is necessary, that we need to, it should be no more often as is necessary, and that it respects privacy. And I think that We've got to balance the rights of offenders with the rights of the community to be safe. Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.